Today's daf is Boker Tov. Today's daf is Tzadik Vav in Bava Basra. So you learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Nesurim Batzar V'Shivya. Things we're looking up. All right, we're at the two dots, 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Itmar on Tzadik Vav Mural, 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Itmar Hamocher Chavasyan LeChavero. If Reuben sells Shimon a barrel of wine, V'chmitza, and it turns sour, turned bad. So what's the halacha? Well, wait a minute. Just look at the Mishnah at the bottom of tomorrow's daf. Tomorrow's daf, Tzadik Zayin Amid Beis. Tzadik Zayin Beis. The Mishnah says if you sell wine to somebody else and it turned bad, you're not responsible for it. There are many stories. There's stories of Dolim who opened up a barrel of wine. They had a cup, and they gave it to some. They took other people took wine out of the barrel, and didn't taste good for them. It wasn't good for them. So what do you say here? It says Amoch Yain LeChavero B'Chmitz. You're not chayiv b'chrais. You're not chayiv. So the seller's not responsible. I sold you wine. You could have tasted it. Now you took it home. Not my problem. That's what the Mishnah says. Rav doesn't say that. The first 3 days it's considered it's the seller's responsibility, even though he sold it. But the first 3 days, it's his responsibility. Why? Because if it turned bad in the first 3 days, we saw in yesterday's daf, or actually in today's daf also at the top, what do we see? That it takes 3 days for it to go bad. From the time it starts to smell a little bit, it takes 3 days for it to go bad. So, if it turned out, if it was bad during the first 3 days, says Rav, it was already bad when I sold it to you. And therefore, it's the seller's responsibility. What about that Mishnah? The Mishnah says that if a seller sells wine to a buyer, tough luck, it's the buyer's problem. So Rabbalun, that's speaking about after 3 days. If it turned bad after 3 days, that's his problem. Or, Rashbam explains, Rabbalun, that Mishnah is speaking about when the seller poured it into the buyer's jug, the buyer bought his own jug, turned bad, it was your jug, you messed it up. You messed it up. That's what the Mishnah says, that the seller's not responsible. But over here, Rav says, if I sell you wine and I give you the jug, and it turns bad within a day or two or up to 3 days, it's my problem to sell. That's what Rav says. It's the mocher, it's considered as if it's on the mocher, it's from. After 3 days, then the buyer can't have any complaints after 3 days. But for the first 3 days, the seller is responsible to make good on the wine. Shmuel disagrees. We're going to see what passing Shmuel says. Chamra akisva the more shavar. The wine leaps onto the shoulders of the owner, meaning once you bought it and it turned bad, it's your tough luck. It's your bad mazel. Wine has a lot to do with mazel, right? It's not, you can, even vintners will tell you, you can make wine, whether it's in your bathtub or in a vat or something. You put in the same ingredients, everything was the same, but somehow it didn't turn out the same every time, right? It doesn't always taste the same. So Shmuel says it depends on the buyer. So therefore, if the buyer bought Shmuel goes just like the Mishnah on tomorrow's daf on Amid Beis, and the Mishnah says over there, if a seller sells wine to the buyer and it turned bad, it's the buyer's tough luck. It's his mazel. Over Rabbi Yosef, Uv the Kavasi de Rav, Rabbi Yosef, like Rav, b'shichr when it comes to beer. Now we'll learn Stam Shechar, we've learned in the Torah is Shechar Tamarim, date beer. Stam Shechar in the Gemara was our kind of beer made from barley or hops. So Rabbi Yosef paskin like Rav when it came to regular beer, meaning if it turned bad within 3 days, the buyer has a complaint to the seller. The Kavasi to Shmuel b'chamer when it comes to wine, we paskin like Shmuel, like the Stam Mishnah on tomorrow's daf, that if the wine went bad, it's your tough luck. You bought it. When I sold it to you, it was good. Too bad. It's your tough luck. The 2 dots on the base. Now, we're going to deal now with brachas. Wait, what bracha do you make on date beer, shecher tomorrow, and vechet shecher some or barley beer, hops beer? Vechet shmara yayin. What is shmara yayin or shimra yayin? That's wine. That's not really good wine. It's made from leaves. What do you mean? At the bottom of the barrel, there's like refuse at the bottom. They call it pomace. It's like leaves. It's junk at the bottom. Now it's grapes. It's the residue of the grapes. And sometimes people who are poor, they'll say I'll make some wine out of that. So I'll pour some water onto it and I'll get wine out of that. Is that really wine? That's going to be a discussion now. So echad sheicha tomorrow, echad sheicha some, echad shimra yayin, bevarcham shakal mivaro. You make a shakal in there. That's not a bar pergofen. That's not good wine. So just like when it comes to beer, the bracha for beer is like schnapps. You guys all know that. What do you bracha you make on schnapps? Shakal mivaro, right? So the same thing. He says for wine, we'll call that Lee's wine, made from shmarim or shmarim wine. Make a shackle. Acher omrim shmarim sheish bam tam yayin. Wait a minute. If it has a taste of wine, after all, it did come from grapes. If it has a taste of wine, you make a bar pir guffen. So we have a machlokas between the Tanakama and Acherim, the others. Acherim could be Rav Meir, but the Acherim says you make a bar pir guffen if it has a taste of wine at all. Rav Yosef Damartavai Enochrim. That's not like the Acherim, but rather this kind of Shimrei Yayin, wine made from leaves, from the refuse, the grape refuse, is not wine, and you only make a shaklan, you don't make a bar pigaf. Amar Rava. Now Rava explains the machlokas. Listen carefully. The Amar Rava, the Kuli Amma, everybody agrees. Let's say you take this grape refuse, right? You take a glob of this grape refuse, a chunk of it, and you pour on it 3 parts water to 1 part of refuse, call it refuse. And when you pour in 3 parts water, you wind up with 4 parts liquid. What does that mean? That you got some wine out of there, right? If you put in 3 parts water, 3 jugs of water, and you got 4 jugs of wine when you put it onto the grapes, that's chamer, that's wine. That's wine. How does wine normally made? Wine was always kept in an undiluted state, not like we have it bottled today and ready to drink. It was undiluted. And how did they mix the wine to make it drinkable? They put in 3 parts water, 1 part wine. So over here, if you put in 3 parts water onto this refuse, onto these shmarim, these leaves, and you got 4 parts came out, that's wine. Says the Kulyam Ramatlas, if you put in 3 parts water and you got 4 out of it, that's wine. Rava goes according to his reason that is explained throughout Shasam. Rava, Kol Chamer de Lodori Al Chad Plus, any wine which cannot stand 3 parts water, right? If you have very cheap wine that's it's undiluted, but it's really garbage, and you put in 3 parts water, it doesn't taste like wine because it wasn't strong wine to begin with. So Kol Chamer de Lodori Al Chad Plus, if any wine, undiluted wine that cannot stand 3 parts water, low chamer, that's not wine. But if it could stand 3 parts water, that's wine. So if you put in 3 parts water into these lees and you wind up with 4 parts of liquid, that's wine. That's regular wine. So that means that the refuse is very strong. Everybody agrees that that's wine. Even the Tanakama would say you make a bar pagafen. Rama tlasav, asa tlasav. Let's say you put in 3 parts water and all you got was 3 parts coming out. That means you got nothing. You netted nothing out of the refuse. So that's certainly that's certainly nothing. You just put in water and you got out water. Nothing. Maybe it looked a little bit reddish, but if you got the same amount of liquid that you put in 3 jugs of water and you got 3 jugs out, so you didn't gain anything. So it's certainly not wine. Even a chayrim would say that you don't make a bar up on that. Kipligi, where's the machlokas between the Tanakam and the chayrim? Kipligi, the Rama Tlasav Asa Tlasu Palga. You put in 3 parts water, and you got 3.5 parts coming out, 3.5 parts of liquid coming out. Rabbanan Savi said, listen, plus ayil, plus nothing. You put in 3, right? You got out 3, that's water. The 3 parts water you put in, you got your 3. What did you gain on top of it? You got a half a part, right? A half a jug, we'll call it, a half a jug of wine, right? Because you had 3 parts water, you put it into the refuse, and it came out 3.5 parts. So you got your wine back, and you got a half a part of wine. Well, a half a part out of 3 is how much? 1/6. That's nothing. That's not wine. Wine has to be 3 parts water to 1 part wine. So everybody said, "What's the machki pligi?" The Rama tlasav asa tlas upalga. Rabbanan sabi tlas ayot tlas enough. You put in 3, you got 3 out. Partially palga, you got a half left over, a half a part or half a jug left over. Upalga b'shisa palgi maya below klumi. 1 part in 6. In other words, 1/2 out of 6 halves, because that's what 3 is. 3 is 6 halves. It's just water. It's not. If you have 1 part of a half a part of wine against 6 parts of water, that's not wine. So therefore you make a shackle, according to the Tanakama. The Chayim who say what? They say you make a bar pegafen. How do you make a bar pegafen if you put in 3 parts water and you got out 3.5 parts? Why do you make a bar pegafen on that? I'll tell you why. So they hold all train upolga. I'm sorry, Savri plus all. You put in 3. Train upalga nafik. When you put in 3 and you got a total of 3.5 out, you know what happened over there? You put in 3, 2.5 parts water came out. Half a part of water is stuck in the refuse. It doesn't all come out. When you put it in, some of the water stays stuck in the glob of refuse. So Achim say, listen, you put in 3 parts water into this glob, and you got out 3.5. Of the 3.5, only 2.5 is water, because a half a part, 1/6 of the water you put in is stuck in there. It doesn't all come out clean. Not every drop of water you put in. You only got 2.5 coming out. So how much is left there? How much of wine is really in there? 1 whole part. You put in 3 parts water, right? 3 parts water, and you got out 3.5. That's the machlokas, right? The Rabbanan say half is nothing. A half out of 6 halves is nothing. So no. You didn't get 3 parts water coming out. You only got 2.5 parts water coming out. The whole amount of liquid that came out was 3.5. Of the 3.5, only 2.5 is water, because a half a part of water gets stuck in the glob of refuse. So therefore, how much wine do you have? You put in 3.5 parts, put in 3 parts, and you got 3.5 parts. And of the 3.5 parts, only 2.5 is water. That means you have 1 whole part of wine, 1 part of wine. Okay, that's what you got. You put in 3. It's still right. No. He says it's not. Listen carefully. You have a glob of refuse. You put in 3 parts water, and 3.5 comes out. Right now you have 3.5. The liquid that came out is 3.5. But he says of the 3.5, only 2.5 is water. 1 whole part is wine that came out of the grapes. Why is only 2.5 parts? Because some of the water stays in the refuse. So you have 1 whole part of wine or grape came out. One whole out of 2.5 is more than 1 out of 3. If you would have, right, 1 against 3 is wine. That we all agree. 1 part wine and 3 parts water, that's wine. Here you have even better, because it's 1 part wine and only 2.5 water. So it's certainly strong. And therefore, the Chaim say you make a bar pegafen. Again, look at it inside. Keep pligi, a few lines above. Keep pligi, you put in 3 parts water and you got 3.5. You put in 3, you got out 3 water. All the water came out. All you have is a half a part of a half a measure. We'll call that of wine. Half a part or half a measure of wine in 6 half measures of water is nothing. It's 1/6 is nothing. No, the ones who say you make a bar pegafen, the say you put in 3. Treyu palganofik. Of the 3 parts water that you put in, only 2.5 came out. Pashle kuza. What's left over is a whole measure, 1 whole jug, 1 measure. Ukuza betreyu palga chamramaya. If you have 1 part wine against 2.5 parts water, that's good wine, and therefore you make a bar pegafen. Says the Gemara, do they really argue in this case? You're saying when there's no machlokas if you put in 3 parts water and you got out 3 parts water, because that's all you got, nothing. You put in 3 parts water and all you got was 3 parts. But the machlokas is only if you put in 3 and you got 3.5. Do you look at it as you only got a half a part of wine, or do you look at it that you got 1 whole part of wine against 2.5 of water? Says the Gemara, do they really argue in this case where you put in 3 and got 3.5? We learn hamatamid. Tamid means you made this temed is called this kind of very diluted wine, not good wine, where you made the wine not by the usual wine process of the vat and all that, but rather you just poured some water on top of the grape refuse. And you put water in, and you got the same amount out. You're putter from meiser. Now, what do we have meiser? It's just wine. On wine, you have to give meisers. What do you give meiser on? On trumas, on the 5 grains. Trumas and meisers you give on the 5 grains, and on wine and olive oil. So is this wine? So let's say you put in 3 parts water, you got 1 and 3 parts came out, the same amount. So Tanakama says that's not wine, it's just plain water, it's colored water. And therefore you don't give from a meiser. Rabbi Yudas Machmir, he says you're chayiv, you have to give meiser on that on that temed, on that cheap, liquidy, wine. Ad kama pligi the machlokas is elabachdemi to us. If you put in 3, you got the same amount 3 coming out. If you got more, low pligi. Even the Rabbanan Lachar would be moda that you have to give meiser on it. So what do you see? That if you put in 3 and got any part more than 3, that would be considered wine. Says more no. Who I didn't feel the pligi. They argue, even like we've explained, even if you put in 3 and got 3.5. Rabbanan say you only got a half out of 6 parts. That's nothing. Behind the comifligi. So why do they argue in the case of meiser when you make temed and you put in 3 and got? Why talk about 3 and you put in 3 and got out 3? Talk about 3 and got out more than 3. But yes, I could tell you the finish of Rav Yehuda's machmer when it comes to meiser. When it comes to meiser, even though it's not really wine, technically you'd only make a shackle on it. You should still give meiser anyway. That's Rav Yehuda's chumrah when it comes to that. So you can't prove anything from there. So we have this machlokas though. If you put in 3 parts and you got in more than 3 parts, let's say 3.5 parts, is that wine or not? The Tanna Kama says no. You only gained a half a part of wine against 3 parts of water. That's 1/6. 1/6 is not wine. Whereas Chayrim say it is wine because when you put in 3, you really and you got out 3.5. Of the 3.5, it wasn't 3 water. It was only 2.5 water because some of the water gets stuck in the refuse. When you made
the wine originally, okay, it was still in the barrel when you took moisture from it. It didn't include shmar.
You're right. If you did it that way, yes, it would include it. But over here, it would include everything. But here, you didn't do that. Let's say here we're talking. No. Here's what happened was you took. Okay, very good. Here what happened is that you had a barrel of wine or whatever it was, a jug or whatever, and you poured it into somebody else to another barrel, and you gave Tumas Samaisis on that, and the leaves that were stuck at the bottom, you didn't give Tumas Samaisis on that because you figured that's going to be garbage. But then somebody came along and poured some water onto it and got the same amount coming out. That's our question, right? If it was on the barrel, you gave the whole thing, yeah, that would be okay. But over here, you didn't do it that way. That's all. Okay, now, Boy Minei Rav Nachman Rav Yitzchak Meir Barab. He asked the following question: Shmarm sheish b'hem tam yayin. These leaves that have a taste of wine, and Rashi explains. Rashbam explains that we're speaking over here that this question that Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak asked Rav Barab, he didn't learn that. He didn't have that price that we just learned. We just had a machlokas, right? We had a machlokas where if you made temed, you poured water on the leaves and you got something out. What's the halacha? So we said one says you make a shackle, one says you make a bar piguf, and we said that everybody agrees. Everybody agrees if you put in 3 and got out 3, that's nothing, right? But he asked that question. He didn't know that brisa. So he asked him shmam sheish b'hem tam yayin, and Rashbam says now. What's the bracha? Do you make a bracha on wine? U'braisa love ishmile. He didn't learn that braisa. You have ishmile. He could have asked that question that we just dealt with that. Shmarim that have a taste of wine. You make a bar piguf or not. So we learned just now that the Tanna Kama says you make a shackle. Acharim say if it has a tam of wine, you make a bracha. Then we went on to explain that if it's actually 3 and came out 3, everybody agrees that you would make it. Machlokes is if you put in 3 and got out 3.5. So here he says, if he had heard that brisa, if he had known of the brisa, is halacha like the Rabbanan or like the Acherim? Although that's not the way Rava explained it. Even according to the Acherim, if you put in 3 and got out 3, you wouldn't make a bracha. But he hadn't heard this question. So he asked him this question. Shmarm sheish b'hem tam yayin, and again, like Rashbam says, that you put in the same amount and got out the same amount. Right? So he said. What's the halacha? That's what he asked me. He asked me this question. He didn't know. So if it has a time of wine, he didn't know that brisa. So he asked me that question. Rashbam says over here. Where's the Rashbam? There's Rashbam here. He says that it's speaking about. That's he asked him that question. Stam. Now it has a time of wine, but he didn't go into the details. If you put in 3, did you get out 3.5? Did you get out 3? He just said, if it has a taste of wine, simply ask it. If you have shmarim, leaves, that have a taste of wine, is the halacha you make a bar pagafan or not? You think that's wine? Kivya ba'amli is simply a strong tasting beverage. It's a very strong tasting beverage. In other words, if you taste it, it's not water. It's not Diet Coke. It's a strong tasting beverage, and it's not really wine. So he answered him like the Rabbanan Pashut, that if you have shmarm that have a taste of wine, you don't make a shackle. You only make a shackle. And as we explained, according to the Acherim, that's only if it was you put in 3 and got out 3. If you put in 3 and got out 3.5, you would make a bar pegafana. But according to the Tanakama, that's apparently how he's explaining now. He says that's not wine at all. Tanarabana. Shmarm shel truma. And here's where Rashbam says, this is what I meant to say before. This is where Rashbam said, Shmarm shel truma. Let's say you have lees of truma. Now, what happened here? Avram, you brought up a good case. Let's say you gave a whole barrel, you took truma and maestris on a whole barrel, right? And you took out the truma and maestris from there. When you took out the truma and maestris from the barrel, you had some wine. You also had some lees there that stayed. Some of the lees were truma. Was truma. Now, can a non-Kohen eat those lees? Of course not. That's truma, right? It's truma. So shmarm shel truma. What happens now if you pour water on them? Now it's all right. You have these lees, and you pour water on them. Is it considered truma? And you pour water on them, and the liquid comes out. Is that wine? Is that wine? Can a Kohen, non-Kohen eat it? So he says we're machmer, even though technically now we're speaking about a case where you put in 3 and got out 3. Not that like we had before. If you put in 3 and got out 3.5, according to that chayrim, you make a bar piguf, and that's wine. Here, Rashbam says we're speaking about right that Rashbam says here we're talking about there's various chumras. I have some lees that of truma, right? That's truma, but I put in 3 parts water and got out 3 parts, and I got out 3. That's all I came out. It's colored now, but it's only 3. It's only 3. Right? I got the same. The water went in, the water came out. Can a non-Kohen drink that liquid? We said before, everybody agrees, according to Rava, that you only make shackle on it. It's not wine, but can a Kohen, non-Kohen do it? So he says when it comes to truma or machmer, rishon d'sheni aser. You put in water once, got some drink out of that. A non-Kohen shouldn't drink it. It's not really truma, but a non-Kohen shouldn't drink it. Let's say you poured water on the same leaves again, a second time, try to get squeeze some more wine out of it. No, it's not wine, but a Kohen shouldn't drink it. Shlishi mutter. If you did water a third time on those same leaves and you got liquid out of it, the same amount of liquid came out that you put in, that's already definitely not truma. And a non-Kohen, mutter means a non-Kohen eat it. Rav Meir Omer af shlishi b'nosantam. If it has some taste of wine, Rav Meir's machmer, maybe Rav Meir goes like the Acherim before, maybe Rav Meir is the Acherim. He says, even if a third time of water, a non-Kohen shouldn't drink it. Shal Meiser. What about Meiser? Yes, it's not Meiser Rishon. It's Shal Meiser Kam. We're talking about Meiser Sheni. What's the halacha about Meiser Sheni? What do you do with Meiser Sheni? You take it in Yerushalayim. So let's say you had these leaves were Meiser Sheni. Right, you have to eat Yerushalayim. But now you poured some water on them. These leaves were Meiser Sheni leaves, and you put some water on them, and the same amount of water that you put in came out. Can you eat it outside of Yerushalayim? So Rishon Aser, only the first time you should be machmer. The first water that came out of it, you shouldn't eat that out of Yerushalayim. Sheni mutter, but the second time you did it, it's really not Meiser Sheni. You can eat that outside of Yerushalayim. Rav Meir's machmer af Sheni b'nosan tam. If it has any taste of wine, you shouldn't eat that outside of Yerushalayim either. Shel hegdish. Let's say you were makdish this wine, and you had some leaves there, and you poured some water. Well, shel hegdish were more machmer, even though it's not really hegdish because you put in water and got out water the same amount. Shlishi aser. Even the Tanakama says, even the third time you did it, it's also because of the chumrah of hegdish. Ravi mutter. Fourth time, it's namish not hegdish. Meir af ravi menosan time. Meir is always machmer one more step. Says Gemara for a minute. Shel hegdish l'olam aser. If it's hegdish, no matter how much water you put on that 100 times, even if the same amount of water came out, it's always aser. You have a chumrah. The shel meiser, if it's meiser sheni, l'olam mutter. Even if you put the first time in, it's not really meiser sheni. So kasha hegdish, kasha meiser, meiser. Hegdish is kasha because we said hegdish has 3 levels or 4 levels according to Meir. And by Meiser, we said it has 1 level. Here we say Hegdish is unlimited, is always Aser, and Meiser is mutter from the beginning. The Gemara says Hegdish, lo kasha kam b'kedush is a guf, kam b'kedush is some. Very good. Hegdish, if it has kedush is a guf. What does it mean kedush is a guf? I gave this wine to use as nesachim, to put on the mizbeach. That's Hegdish, like a carbon. That has no limit. No matter how much water you put on that, any water that comes out of that, the same amount of water, less water comes out, it's always you have to treat it like Hegdish. And a non-Kohen can't drink it, etc. Okay. And if it has kedusha guf, mamish, you shouldn't do anything with it. Just you can't use it at all. Kam kedusha dam was only given as kedusha dam. I'll give it as a donation to Bedek Abayis. They'll sell that and buy sheep with it or whatever. So if kedusha damim, then it has 3 or 4 levels. Meiser no makasha. Kam meiser madai. Kam meiser d'mai. If it's meiser sheni for sure, then we say if you may put water on it, you shouldn't eat it outside of Yerushalayim, the first level, according to Meir's second level. And if it's Meiser Demai, which is really only a Chumer Drabanan, why? Because most Amaratzim do give Meiser. They all give Truma, because that's an Isser Misa, and it's also it's only a very small amount. So everybody gives Truma. Most of them give Meiser Rishon and Meiser Sheni also. But since it's Demai, you bought from an Amoritz, so we're more makel. If it's Meiser Sheni for sure, it has 1 level. I mean, if you put water in, you get water out. The same amount of water comes out. You should be machmer 1 level. If it's meiser demai, you don't have to be machmer at all. And Rabbi Yochanan is going to say that we'll pick it up from here tomorrow, Mr. We'll leave this for tomorrow. Rabbi Yochanan is going to say that the same halacha that the chumras and the kulas that we're talking about over here apply. In other words, if you take 2 levels or 3 levels or 1 level, depending whether it's truma or meiser sheni or hegdish, the same thing applies to this liquid. Is it machshir something from kabel tuma? What do we mean? The 7 liquids that are machshir something come to. If you have food that's detached from the ground, in order for it to become tamei, you have to be machshir. You have to put liquid on it. So we're going to say that the same rules apply. That there's a limit of 2 or 3 or 4 or 1, whatever the limit is. It applies also in terms of it acting as a hechsher from kabel tuma. So the Gemara say, what do you mean? Everything is hechsher from kabel. Any liquid, whether it's wine or water, it's machshir kabel tuma. The Gemara is going to deal with that tomorrow. We'll see that tomorrow. Rabbi Yochanan will pick it up here tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll start 5 minutes earlier. Just 5 minutes earlier at 5:15. Just 5 minutes earlier. We'll get to the Mishnah tomorrow from here 5 minutes early. Because tomorrow we have Slichas at 5:45. Today it's at 5:55 in about 6-7 minutes. And then on Tuesday as well. Tuesday also it's 5:55. 5:55. And on Wednesday, Erev Rosh Hashanah, there is no slichas now. There's no slichas at this time. It's going to be at 6:30, or unless you want to come the night before. Meaning the regular slichas for 6:30 will be for the 8 o'clock minyan. So if you want, you could daven at 6:15, the regular time on Wednesday, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and then pardon?
6:05. I asked to make it early.
No, it's 6:15. It's 6:15. That's the schedule. You can't change the magnet now. You can't change it.
It's been changed.
Huh?
It's been changed.
That's